The sound persisted through the night. The scratching and clawing behind the walls and baseboards could be heard throughout the house. The children huddled on their beds and didn't dare drop their feet on the floor in fear of what they perceived was hiding just in the shadows underneath. It was then that John Bell first heard the disembodied voice.
"You will die, John Bell."
I'm Broadcaster 7, and this is The Curse of the Bell Witch. It all started in the town of Red River, now Adams, Tennessee. The town was made up of a large community of Baptist Christians, working the land and living a pious life. One of the most successful and prominent farmers in the area was John Bell. John married his wife, Lucy Williams, and the Bells prospered over the years and were amongst the area's most successful planters. In that time, Bell and his wife had 6 children: Jesse, Betsy, Richard, John Jr., Jewelry, and Benjamin. The strange phenomena all started in 1817. John was walking his property when he spotted a strange animal. It was large and black and resembled a dog, but its head was shaped like a rabbit. He took aim with his firearm and took his shot, but missed, and the animal ran off before he could reload. Shortly after, his son Drew was walking home from a neighbor's house when he spotted something strange. On the fence 40 yards away was a large bird. But not just any bird. This was a gigantic black bird. As Drew approached it, it spread its massive wings and flew away. But the strange sightings didn't end there. The Bell's daughter Betsy was out in the nearby forest and saw a strange girl in a green dress swinging and singing in the trees. Betsy could never quite catch up to the girl, and her songs seemed to taunt Betsy for this. Many farmers and ranchers in the area used slave labor at the time to help keep up with their lands, and the Bells were no different. The enslaved people on the property started reporting strange balls of light out in the woods just after sunset. They reported that the lights would come out of the forest and approach the house, but wouldn't go past the fence line. One of the Bell slaves, a man named Dean, was chased and attacked by a large dog-like creature anytime he would go to visit his wife. He was able to fend off the beast and reported the attack to the Bells. For months, the farm experienced these strange phenomena, until one day, it seemed to move into the house. The family reported they heard knocking along the doors and walls. Searching as they did, they could not find the source of the knocking, and it only got worse. The family heard the sound of gnawing on and under the beds, and chains along the floor. Strange animal sounds would echo from the shadows throughout the night. The events soon turned physical. Sheets and blankets were ripped from the children's bed at night. Some, particularly the daughter Betsy, would be pushed, slapped, and scratched by an unseen entity. John Bell began to suffer strange symptoms like a numbing of the mouth and an inability to swallow food. In desperation, John went to his friend, James Johnston. James was skeptical at first, but assured his friend that he would look into the happenings around the Bell farm. James and his wife stayed in the farmhouse that very night. As soon as the sun set on the Bell farm, the noises started up, just like every night. The doors started to rattle. The walls began to flex in and out as if they were breathing, and the sound of chains being dragged across the floor could be heard throughout the house. John's blankets were ripped off his bed, and in frustration, he screamed, "Who are you, and what do you want?" To his absolute horror, something or someone answered him back.
"I am a spirit. I was once very happy, but I have been disturbed."
The next morning, the farm was searched, and evidence of an Indian burial mound was found on the property, just like the spirit had hinted at. They also found a dark cave near the house. The family believed that the cave was the resting place of whatever was causing the disturbances and refused to let anyone enter. John and James became convinced that the voice they heard was that of a witch and recruited friends and preachers in the area to help. Soon, word of the haunting spread through the town and eventually throughout the South. Every night, the witch would talk and answer questions asked by the Bell family and their guests. Eventually, the voice revealed that her name was Kate. Things soon took a darker turn. When asked what her intentions were, the witch replied the haunting wouldn't end until John Bell was dead. One of the Bell's neighbors became a prime suspect for the hauntings. Her name was Mary Catherine Batts, but she went by Kate, just like the disembodied spirit claimed it went by. You see, the Batts and the Bells had a family feud. Years before, John Bell and a member of the Batts family had a falling out over the sale of an enslaved person. Because of this feud, the Bells and the people of the surrounding area became suspicious of Kate Batts. Although she was questioned many times, Kate always denied the accusations that would haunt her the rest of her life. No evidence was ever found to link her to witchcraft or other phenomena at the Bell farm. John was not the only target of the witch's attacks. For some reason, the Bell's daughter Betsy was the victim of a majority of the witch's fury. Betsy suffered from scratches and pokes. She would also experience the sensation of being pricked by pins and even being slapped. At one point, Betsy was so fed up that she fled the house to a neighbor's. That night, the neighbor's doors blew open and the witch's voice mocked Betsy for thinking that she could escape. Betsy was set to marry a local man named Joshua Gardner, but the witch seemed to have other ideas. Every time Betsy was with Joshua, she claimed that the witch would punish her. After a year of abuse, Betsy broke off the engagement with Joshua. Strangely, though, the witch seemed to like John's wife, Lucy, and would make fresh fruit appear for her and sing her hymns. For 3 long years, anyone staying on the farm reported the voices, noises, and attacks. The witch would even impersonate family members to lure victims off by themselves before attacking them. This, in turn, would attract people from the surrounding area to investigate the Bell farm. The more people that came and engaged with the spirit, the stronger and louder it became. The witch seemed to be feeding off the energy and belief that the visitors would bring to the farm. Many came to the house to challenge the spirit, but none lasted the night. Many a guest left screaming in the night, never to be seen again. Even future President Andrew Jackson, who owned land in the area. It is said that on his way to the property, his wagon became stuck, although he and his men could not find a reason why. Reportedly, Jackson and his men heard the voice of the witch mocking him. That night, after setting up camp, the witch allegedly returned. One of the members of Jackson's party was a self-proclaimed witch hunter, which was apparently a thing at the time. After claiming to have a silver bullet that could kill the spirit of the witch, he was not able to fire his pistol when showing it off to his friends. Shortly after this, he was attacked and beaten by an unseen force to the point that the man fell unconscious. Cutting their losses, Jackson and his men felt it better to return back to Memphis rather than to proceed to the Bell House. The attack and abuse from the witch continued for years, with the intensity of the paranormal encounters growing with the popularity of the tale. Finally, after years of suffering under the witch's attacks and bizarre symptoms, John Bell finally died in the winter of 1820. He was 70 years old. Upon finding their father's body in his bed, the children of John found what looked like a dark, sticky liquid in a bottle next to his bedside. Just then, the house rang out with a maniacal laughter. The witch's voice then proclaimed,
"I've done it. I've finally poisoned old Jack."
During the funeral of poor old John, the witch could be heard singing drinking songs and celebrating its achievements. After John's funeral, the witch spoke one last time, claiming to return in 7 years, and then was silent. A strange calm and quiet settled over the Bell farm for the first time in 3 years. The family settled into their new life without their husband and father. Betsy Bell married Richard Powell, a local teacher, shortly after, and moved to Mississippi. The youngest Bell boy would document the events of the bizarre haunting down in his diary, and later this would become printed into a book. The rest of the family would move on and marry, some staying on the Bell farm, others moving away. 7 years later, the witch kept her promise and returned. She returned to John Jr. and Betsy separately and ranted about time, the past, and the future. By this time, the now grown children had learned from their past and refused to engage with the spirit. After 3 days, the spirit prophesied that she would return to haunt the descendants of the Bells in 107 years. After this proclamation, the witch was never heard by the family again, much to their relief. 107 years came and went as of 1935, and no report of the witch's return has ever been reported by the descendants of the Bell family. Just because the Bell family never reported the witch's return doesn't mean the story of the Bell Witch was over, though. The story of the witch was imprinted into the fabric of the South's fables and stories for generations to come. That's why, 60-plus years after the event of the hauntings, the people of Hopkins, Kentucky blamed the strange happenings in their town on the Bell Witch. The local preacher reported that lumps of coal materialized and fell from his ceiling for 4 straight hours. The house was destroyed by the falling debris. He reported this happening 3 times over the next few days. Newspapers around the area reported this incident and blamed it on the famous witch. Even in 1868, the fear of witchcraft was still prevalent in the area. Tom Clinard and Dick Burgess were arrested for the murder of a man named Mr. Smith. Tom and Dick claimed that Smith, empowered by a witch, was carrying out occult attacks against them. They claimed that the murder of Mr. Smith was justified as self-defense. The jury of the state versus Clinard and Burgess returned a not guilty verdict. The story of the Bell Witch has gone on to inspire books and movies throughout the years. It has become ingrained in folklore and legend. The question is, what really happened? Were the Bells in the town of Red River, Tennessee really under attack by a malevolent, intelligent spirit of a witch? Or were they caught up in some sort of hysteria? Were all the events in the story just made up, creative fiction of people that claimed to be there all those years ago? One thing's for sure, though. It's a good story. You know, it's interesting. One of you out there watching this video right now might be a descendant of the Bell family. The witch is well overdue for a return. Who knows? Maybe tonight you might hear some scratching under your bed. Maybe there'll be some kind of knocking on the walls. Maybe you might hear the voice of the witch whispering in your ear. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon. I'm Broadcaster 7. Are you receiving the night signal?